Welcome to Animation for All. My name is Nathan Adams. I am your host. This program is presented to you by Shamble Studio.
Ah, love is in the air. And what better way to celebrate it than with an animated greeting for your loved one? In this tutorial, we're going to show you just how to do that. A nice animated greeting for the one that you love. We start our scene in Blender 2.69, and this is our character Stanley. Doesn't he just look so adorable? We're going to get him to even be more adorable by animating him. And to do that, we're going to do a few things to get him started by giving him some movement. And we have him fully rigged, and he is available at shamble.blogspot.com at this episode, the Throb episode. And I'll have that included in the links for the YouTube viewers. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to move this around a little bit on this object so you can see his eyes moving, doing all that stuff, right? So let's just put it right there, and then let's insert a keyframe, location, rotation, scale, so you press I to do that, all right? And then, because we want him to look totally stunned and amazed at what he's seeing, you, the viewer, we're going to press G for this piece, which what it does is it takes off a constraint on the eyes, which allows his eyelids to lift. And so now he has that totally dazed look on his face. Like, wow, isn't that just amazing? We're going to press I, location, rotation, scale. And then we're going to make him look like he's smiling. So we have his cheeks right here. There we go. No, we don't want that. Okay, so let's get rid of that. Okay, so we're going to press G. Let's make him smile here. Insert keyframe there with pressing I, location, rotation, scale. All right. And those will be a couple of things to get him started. I'm going to do a couple more things. I'm going to change this from global to normal. I'm also going to turn on the gimbal so that we have all of our constraints here. I'm going to rotate his foot. I'm going to insert a keyframe there, location, rotation, scale. And then I'm going to Control C with that pose. And then I'm going to mirror that pose by pressing Shift Control V. There we go. I'm going to select that bone that we just moved. I'm going to insert a keyframe there. Same thing. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into our animation menu. So we'll get Control, left arrow. All right. And I want to put a little bit of movement that's not quite perfect, if you know what I'm saying. He doesn't stand perfectly still. And we want to show that in this animation so he doesn't look like some kind of a picture that all he does is he stands and maybe a couple of movements come out of him. So what we'll do is we'll look at all these things that are in the animation in the F-curve editor. And if we do Shift Spacebar, we can maximize the screen. Press N for properties. All right. And what I'm looking for is I'm looking for X location, Y location, and Z location. And with each of these, I'll start with X. I'll add modifier, and I'm going to put noise. A lot of noise right there, and it could look really buggy when you're looking at your animation. If we go in and we look at our animation window, look at all that movement. That's a lot of movement. He looks really jittery, doesn't he? Yes, we want jitter, but not that much. So let's go back. Let's reduce that noise. Take the strength to say about 0.1. Let's look at it there. All right, now there's a little bit of movement. It's not very much, but it's subtle enough that it still looks like he's moving and that he's actually alive and he's not some still thing that's just being moved. All right, We'll do the same thing for our Y location, add modifier, noise, and we'll do the same 0.1 strength. Z location, same thing. Noise, 0.1. There we go. And now we have subtle movement. You can move that around as you need, but the point is there's going to be some noise, and that's just how real life works. Okay, now I want to go back to that default screen, so we do Control right arrow 2 times. All right. And then the next thing I want to do is I want to add some hearts. Actually, specifically, I want to add a heart right here. So to do that, what we do is we go into our user settings, Control Alt U, and then in our add-ons, we're going to search for planes, and you'll see import, export, import images as planes. So let's check that. Let's get out of this box. And now, if we press Shift A, you'll notice Add Mesh, and you'll see at the very bottom here, Images as Planes. So let's select that option, and then we're going to go into our textures. And we're going to get this image, hearts.png. There are a few options that we need to make sure that we check here. All right. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to go shadeless. We want to use alpha. That's very important on this one. And then as we look through this, receive transparent shadows isn't such a big deal, so we're not going to worry about that. All right, and then we have all our stuff that we need. Let's go ahead and let's import this image. So now we have this image that's down at our character's feet. So Stanley, your heart's down being trampled by you. We need to bring it up. So let's bring it up by pressing G, and let's press Z, and then we're going to rotate X-axis, and let's do 90 degrees, and let's pull that image plane forward, and let's just put it a little to our right, his left, and then we're going to put a little bit of tilt to it. All right. Now, if we were to just put this into our rendered view, take a look at how this is. All right, so we can see that we have our heart, but you'll notice that the sky color is coming onto it. So that is something that we need to eliminate, and that brings us to our next step, and that is putting it into a new layer. So we'll go through and we'll just put it into the new layer, and I'll show you how to do the compositing in just a moment. All right, now to solve the problem of what do we do about this little box out. We don't want this showing up on our image, so what we need to do is let's get into our shaded view again. So we go to Z, Z again. Okay, now we're back into where we have, actually that's material, I believe. So now what we do is we need to move this to another layer. So we'll press M, and we want to move this to layer 2. So we press 2. There we go. Now it's out of that visibility, but we want to turn this layer on. Now here's the reason why we're moving it to layer 2. The reason we're doing that is because now we can have a little bit more control on what the transparency is going to look like in our final scene. So if we go to our render layers, we have render layer, and let's get this on now. So right now these two are the active layers, and these are the ones that can be rendered as long as they're visible in here. So what we want to do is we want to eliminate this layer. So let's get Shift and let's click that. And then let's make a new render layer, and we'll call this one overlay. All right, and on overlay, we just want to have this layer selected. And now, if we go into the compositor, we do Control, left arrow, okay, right here, just once, that's all I needed. Then, what we do is we say Use Nodes, and then right here, if we were just render right now, F12, let's take a look at that scene. And you'll notice this shadow being cast on there. That's from the heart that we just imported. But you'll notice that there is no heart there because we need to get that new render layer. So let's press Shift D. And then, render layer, we're going to go to overlay. And then we want to do an alpha over so that we can get the alpha of this one onto this one. So let's press Shift A. We're going to go to color alpha over. Now, I'm going to show you this thing really quickly of what's happening here. You'll notice that now we have our scene, but look at what this does. The heart is showing there, and the sky and the heart entirely takes over. You don't see any outline or anything like that, but you don't see our character either. So when we go back into our render layers, we need to go into overlay, and then for include, we need to actually exclude sky. And now when we do a render of this, F12, there's our character with the shadow on his chest. Yes, we know that's going to be a little mitigating factor there. But now we have the heartbeat. There it is. Nothing wrong with that scene right there, is there? So now that we have that set up, now we can animate that heart beating on our character. And then we can do a few more things if we want to, depending on how complex we want to make this animation. So the last thing I'm going to do before I get into our next segment is that I want to parent this to our character's skeleton. So I'm going to turn on the last layer, which is our deform bones. I want to parent this, if I get the right object, to our skeleton. Control P, and we'll just set the parent to the bone. Alright? And then with that, we can do any type of movement we want, and that heart will go right with our character. So, that's the last thing, and then I'm going on to our next scene. Alright, now we have that taken care of. And I am actually going to pull this forward a little bit. There we go. So G, Y. There we go. And now, let's animate the heartbeat. And to do this, I am going to rotate this object, and I am going to scale it so that it looks like a pretty cool heartbeat. So, we will go to a place where we have our timeline. So if we go into our animation menu, and I want to be in our camera view, so get 0 on the numpad. Actually, I'm on a laptop, but that doesn't matter. It's universally translated. So now we go into our timeline. Let's set a keyframe a few frames later for this item. So if we press I, location, rotation, scale, and then let's go a few frames more. We'll take it to about 23, let's say. Okay. And then we'll add another keyframe there. Actually, first of all, before we do that, I want to rotate this and scale it, and we'll put on normal. Alright, and then scale it up. And then I'm going to rotate it a little bit. Alright. And then insert another keyframe. And then I'm going to duplicate this keyframe. So go to frame. Now let's see, which one was it? Okay, I believe it's in here. That's what I'm looking for. Sorry about that, folks. Alright, so if we take all of our keyframes here in this one, what we can do is duplicate. And put this a little bit later. And honestly, it doesn't matter if it's totally perfect. I'm not going to judge, because honestly, perfection is not always necessary here. Okay. So anyway, now we have some of that set up. And then I think what I'd like to do is just a couple more of those heartbeats. So we'll Shift D to duplicate again. I want that on X. Okay. Just a couple more times, and then I think we'll have it. All right. So now if we go back to the beginning, now we have a good heartbeat there. And I would like to take this just to frame 145 so that we get 6 seconds of playback. So that will be our scene. It'll be 6 seconds, nothing really big. So we can do a couple more things, like we can make him jump up because he's just so excited to see you. And we can even do some eye blinks. So let's take this item and we're going to add a keyframe right here. Like I say, I'm not doing total perfection, because one thing about animation is you do have some randoms. Yes, there is planning involved, but there's also good room for random things to happen. Okay, and then I'm going to just kind of duck him down a little bit so he has some anticipation. Insert a keyframe there. And I will also insert a keyframe. That one I'm not going to worry about too much there. Okay, right there. Let's do something very simple there. And then in the next one, go a few frames more. I want to pull him up as much as possible now. And I am going to add keyframe at that point. Okay. Location, rotation, scale, and I'll insert one there. And then I'll go back into our animation, into our F-curve editor, and I'm going to deselect all these frames here. When you get to that, let's see. And we'll shift D, X, alright, if we press B, get rid of those by pressing X, delete keyframes. Okay, so that way he should return back to his position of being planted on the ground. Okay, you notice that's a very quick hop. So let's just take that a little bit more. And let's move it over so that we have a much longer jump. And now when we go back, then there we go. So that's something simple to get a good animated sequence here. And then, of course, to get this animated, what we'll do at the end is we're going to set up our scene. We have our presets set to 1920 by 1080 at 100%. Our output we'll take to our local directory. So go one up here. Render cache is what we want to do. And we'll call this heart throb. There we go. And then we'll turn this into a series of PNG images. And then once we're done with this, we will have the final render. And so I will show that to you in a moment. Well, thank you once again for watching another Animation for All episode. I hope you learned how to make a great Valentine for your sweetheart. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you liked this, please leave me a review. If you didn't like it, also leave me a review. And also, subscribe to my channel at Shembo Studio. Check me out at shembo.blogspot.com for even more content. You can also check out Shembo Studio on Facebook or on Twitter at Shembo Studio. Thank you for watching,